And here is the part in the video that if you've been following from the start, you've been waiting for, where we actually start to do the pixel work. And if you want to jump in at the same point that I'm at, you can get my files from my Patreon. It's $5 a month. You'll get access to everything as I put the tutorials up, all the source files, all the assets, and you can make sure you're following in the same way. It obviously really helps support the channel, but you know, it's no pressure to do it, and you can follow this tutorial in full without needing to do any of that. So what I'm going to show you is the simplest way to do this, then the easiest way, which is not the same thing. The easiest way is a little bit more complicated to set up, but gives you a lot more flexibility, and it's the way that I choose to work. How are we going to do this? So the first thing to do is let's go into our shading tab, and we're actually going to take this material and rename it. So we'll call it Pixel Matte. And we're just going to delete this UV test image. So everything should go white because all of our materials are linked. So we're already set up. And then what we need to do is make a new image texture. So we're going to Shift and A, search image texture, and we're going to click new. And I like to work in 256 by 256 pixels. Again, that feels like a sort of PS1 type spec. I'm going to call this pixel art layer or whatever you want. We don't need an alpha for this, but let's leave it on, and let's set the color to, we'll keep it black for now. Okay, and we'll hit new image. And then this part is very important, and I will show you why. We're going to change this to closest, and then we're going to connect the color to the base color. Okay, and then we're going to hit the button that says texture paint. But before we do that, we need to make sure that we've got this layer selected. If you have any problems with things not showing up, 9 out of 10 times it's because you haven't got this layer selected, this image selected in the shading tab. And then we're going to go to texture paint. And this view will now shift to show us our UV map on one side and our murdered out black impreza on the other in 3D. And if we go to the top with the tools, we've got our brush already selected. So what I want to do is change the brush to a pixel art one. So we're going to click on the large thumbnail. And then if we go to pixel art, we've got two options, paint pixel and erase pixel. And unsurprisingly, we want paint pixel. So let's just pick a color and see what happens if we paint on the car. Unsurprisingly, we're painting huge amounts of pink on the car. And it works in a 3D space. So, you know, as you drag and rotate, you'll see different angles and you can create this hideous monstrosity here. You'll also notice that as I paint on one side, it's mirroring onto the other. And the reason for that is because our UV maps are sharing the same space, and I want that. I want that for speed, because there's no point, you know, the bulk of the car is completely symmetrical, so there's no point in doing everything twice. And again, if you look at a lot of retro games, they had such a small amount of memory in space for textures that they did kind of duplicate things. So sometimes you'll see weird stuff like the numbers and the sponsor logos being the wrong way around. I think there's a couple of Gran Turismo cars where they just mirrored it and not thought about how that affects the logos. Okay, so we can change our brush size up and down. On my keyboard, it's a square bracket, but you can also change it in the size settings. So let's use those so we can get a much finer edge. And we can take it right down to being individual pixels, which is how we're going to be working. Okay, and I mentioned that it was important to have this shading set to closest, this interpolation mode. If you change to linear and then we go back, you'll see that things get soft and fuzzy, and it's because Blender, and it's the same with Photoshop and other image editors, is trying to smooth out the image. It's going, we have very little resolution here. I don't think the user wants it to look pixelated, so I'm going to try and blur and smooth it, but that's the opposite of what we want for this. So you can change this at any point, and we're just going to change it back to closest. So the easiest way to do this, or the simplest way, not the easiest way, would be we go into a texture paint and we would start by making the car, you know, an iconic Subaru blue, something like that. And then we've got our paint tools over here, and we're just going to choose fill. And for some reason, I didn't realize it didn't pick up on the, I think I can fill that. Yeah, I didn't know I did that. That's good to know. So now we've got a blue car, and then you might go in and start painting in, you know, let's say we're going to pick a space for the color for the windscreen. So something like this. And then we're just going to go back to paint tool, and we might start painting in the windscreen and working our way around and just treating it as one single layer of color that we build up on and change. Please don't judge what I'm doing now as how the final result's going to look. It's not going to be this. We're going to do this properly. But so we would just work on around. Definitely don't freestyle this. Let's put in the grill. And another thing that's worth changing at this point, you might notice that we've got highlights on the material. It doesn't look great as we're working. So let's just go into the shading tab and we're going to turn the roughness fully up. And then we've got a much more kind of flat shaded look. And I also prefer to work in this view, the material preview. So I would start like this, and I'm also going to teach you how we're going to straighten out this grill later on, but that's less important for this bit. So this is just a very quick demo of one way you could do it. So you go in, and maybe we want a different shade of the blue to suggest some highlights. So I can use my eyedropper tool, and then you've actually got two colors here. So you can flip between them. You can have two colors loaded into your palette. And maybe I would paint like a highlight on this edge. A bit hard to see it. Just bump up their brightness a little bit. Making a real mess of this, but I'm sure you already get the idea now. Let's go with that for now, that'll do. So we could put a highlight in there. Maybe we would put a darker shade in underneath to kind of show some shadow. That's way too dark. But anyway, I think you get the gist here. You understand what we're doing. So this is one way to go and do it. And I won't judge you if you do it this way. But the problem is, if we then try and tweak anything, you're literally painting over everything by hand. And we don't want to do that. So let's have a look at the second approach. So the second approach gives us a way that we can build different layers of paint and easily tweak it. So say we wanted to make the car yellow or red, we would literally just fill this color in and it wouldn't affect all of our highlights and shadows and things. So the way I like to work is we're going to delete this layer and we're going to make something from scratch. So Shift and A, search image texture, and then I'm going to hit new and we're going to call this base color and we're going to keep 256, 256. And just for speed, let's actually just fill it before we start. So let's make it our Subaru blue and we can change this later. And we're going to hook this up to the base color again. So there we go, same as before. But now we're going to make another image texture. So Shift and A, image texture, new, and we're going to keep everything the same. And I'm just going to change this fill to, we're going to reset it. So I'm going to right click and reset to default value. That didn't do anything. Let's set our value to 1 and our saturation to 0. And then 0.5, yeah, 0.5. So it's back in the middle now. And your hex should read all the Fs. And we're just going to bring this down slightly below white. So we're going to get an off-white, and it should be something like, yeah, EC, EC, EC. The FFs at the end are to do with the alpha, so we don't need to worry about that. So EC, 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 you get the gist. And I'm going to hit new image. We're going to call this layer value. And we just need to make sure that both of these are set to closest. Whenever you click on a layer, you'll see it previewed in this little window at the side. So we've got a slightly off-white layer and a base color layer. And certain value comes from kind of like illustration work where you work primarily in black and white and you build in the highlights and the shadows of the object. You're building out the form. So our value layer is going to be our black and white layer that we're going to use to define the body panels, the highlights, the shapes of the car. And we're going to mix that with the base color. So if we now drag this over and we're going to use mix color, and we're going to connect both of these up for now. and we're going to work out which way around it needs to be. And so at the moment, we're getting on this slider, if we move it all the way to the right, we get 100% of the base color, and all the way to the left, we get 100% of the value. What we actually want is multiply. And then if we move it all the way over, we're mixing this value with the base color. And what that's going to let us do is if we now select the value, and we'll just test it out first before we go too far through the process. If I pick a shade that say we're going to use for creases and I paint it on, you'll see that we get a dark line. And then if I pick a light shade, we should just about be able to see a highlight line. Now, I'm just going to work out if that highlight is strong enough. I think maybe we need it to stand out a little bit more. So we're just going to adjust our color here. And at this point, it would be a good idea to start making a palette. So what we can do is if we scroll this down, and I'm working on a little MacBook screen, so you should hopefully have a bit more space to show things. We're going to expand this color palette and click new, and we're just going to name it value palette. What we can do now is we're going to put, just going to reset the default value and pull that up. So we've got pure white. So we're going to add that in. And then I think I want maybe like this color to be our base color. So this will effectively be our neutral color. And then we're going to give ourselves a couple of shades of darker as well. So I'm just going to keep working down. And with pixel art, it's really important to have the same set colors to come back to. So every time we're doing a highlight, we're going to use this pure white. And every time we're doing a shadow or cut line, we're going to use this one. And if we need a darker shadow, we've got a third option. So let's go to our mid color, essentially our baseline. And let's just fill everything. And then let's use our, let's see if we can see our highlight. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so we've got more of a visible highlight now. Okay, so this should be kind of everything we need. And we're going to make further layers for things like decals and the lights. But we'll paint in things like the vents in the value because they'll be pure black. And that's normally quite a good place to start. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Also, just worth, there's a couple of little tricks and important stuff to flag up as well. You'll see here in the image, we have an asterisk next to it. And that's Blender telling me, it's the same up here actually. Blender is telling me that the file isn't saved. So you need to save the image as you go. And I think I've got a folder. So I'm just going to call this Impreza Value Pixel. I've already got one in place. And if we go back to shading, and we do the same thing, I think this is, let's just save this out as, so there shouldn't be anything interesting going on at the moment. What you can also do, because I forget what, the way Blender works is that's a file that it now links to. But if you don't remember to save the images when you quit, and it will prompt you, but you know, if anything happens, you can lose stuff. So I find it's best to have automatically pack resources enabled. And then when you save it, it will automatically save the images. The other thing to note that you might just prefer working this way is that you can also paint straight on the UV map. And there's a little bit of a delay in it coming up, but okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint in all of the black areas of our car. And it's important that we shift back to the value layer. And I know this because I've just done 10 minutes recording this video where I was on the wrong layer. So make sure you've got your little white, off-white preview here. And we're now back to texture paint. And you can see on this side that we're now painting on the white layer. So I'm going to just add in a pure black as well, which, you know, we could probably get away with not painting that in, adding that to our palette, but it's just handy to have it. And I'm going to start working on this side, I think. So make sure you get your brush selected. I know that this refers to the chassis, so we're just going to paint in. And we can be pretty rough with it, but we want to make sure that we're not overlapping any other UV maps. And that's looking pretty clean. And let's do these wheel wells as well. So hopefully your UV maps match up with mine, but I will show you how to find out which part you need to paint if not. And I'm also going to show you what happens if you go over the lines. It's like old school colouring in. So because we're working on a value layer now, we can't just delete. We need to use our neutral color. So you're going to be using this color a lot, but you can just paint it back if you wanted to, you know, if you're trying to be super neat and tidy. And depending on how densely packed your UV maps are, you might need to be super neat. So that's this inside of the well painted. And let's have a look at this one as well. Nice, easy identifiable shape, so we're not going to struggle here. But how do we work out what these parts are? So we've got a couple of options. We could just paint straight on. And then we can see, oh look, there it is. So I'm just going to carry on filling this in. And this is very scruffy. And it's a little bit closer to these edges than I'd like. So let's just zoom in. And we need to make sure that we've got all these. And, you know, just for the sake of not being absolute hooligans, let's just tidy these edges up a little bit. Not important, but it's just nice to see a neatly unpacked, unwrapped and shaded, textured even, UV map. So let's just clean that edge up. Okay, so that's one way of seeing. And we've got one pixel that we've missed. You can see it here, and that was me trying to be too neat. Okay, so we know, we could probably guess that this is the other one, but let's just find a way of checking. So if we go to object mode, we just need to make sure that our, I've just turned off my gizmos, but you are unlikely to have done that. But if you can't see anything, make sure it's on. We're looking at this side of the car, and if I select a face, or I select multiple faces, we can see where it's on the UV map. And in fact, if I hit the L key for select link, it's already running to the seam. So select everything that is on that individual seam. Excuse me. Okay, so let's have a look at the back section. So we now notice this part. So we need to just go back to our texture paint. I'm just having to scroll across because I'm working on such a small screen, but hopefully yours is big enough to show everything. And we'll just paint this one in. Okay, and if you're keen-eyed, you might have noticed that some parts have disappeared from our UV map, like we can't see the wheel shapes anymore. And the reason for that is at the moment, they're all separate objects, and I'm quite keen to keep it like that for ease. But if you want to see all of your unwrapped objects together, we're just going to select everything at once, and then go back into texture paint, and now we can see all of our UV, so here's our wheels. And we're just going to do the same thing, we're just going to paint these, I'm going to do a nice big brush, make sure we get everything. And same here. So that's clearly the inside of the wheel because we didn't see any changes. That's the outside. And then I think this is our tyre. In fact, I know it is. So let's, for now, let's just make this all black as well. Great. And there we go. And I'm just going to hit save. And make sure that I've got my external data set to save. Yep, we're all good. So we don't need to worry about this asterisk now. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I could have done this myself. You've literally just painted solid black everywhere. And that is true. But we're now going to get into doing all the individual parts of the car, and the workflow will start to show itself. So let's start filling in the front details of the car. And I just want to flag up something that I've discovered whilst working on these files. If when you load it up, it looks like your value shader. So say you need to roll back to a previous save version, and I recommend saving new versions as you go. By default, this is set to sRGB. When I've loaded back an older version of the file to check over things, if it's set to sRGB, for some reason my value shader becomes darker. So if that happens to you, just change this to non-color and it will revert back to where it needs to be. So that caused me to scratch my head for a few minutes. So let's go back to texture painting, and we're going to just look at the first easy part of this card to fill in. So let's start with this space down here at the bottom. So making sure we're on our value layer, which we are, and we've got our pixel brush selected. And we can use a fairly big brush to start with. And we also just need to make sure that we've got the car body selected. So make sure you're in object mode, because sometimes you'll start to paint and nothing happens. So we're just going to fill in this, and because we've simplified the design so much, the blueprints are not going to match up perfectly, but that gives us a starting point. So let's not worry about the fact it's going to get wobbly there. Obviously you can undo at any point, but it undoes back to the point that you let go of the mouse button, which might not be what you need at this point. So we're just going to use our default value, paint this back out again. And then after a while, it's better to switch to the 3D view and look at the shape. And I like to have kind of rules in pixel art about how we're going to define shapes. And in this case, this corner, we either want this kind of curve or this kind of curve. So I think I actually want this to the front, so something like that. Okay. And now let's have a look at this grill here. And you can see already that our actual bumper line is higher than the shape that we've got. So we're going to overpaint slightly. We're going to start maybe up here. And you can also see another problem. Why is it doing that? I'm painting a straight line, but it's making things diagonal. So the answer to that is in the UV map. If you look at our UV map, the way it's unwrapped is it slopes down, which isn't a lot of use for us with pixel art. If we were working at a much higher resolution, you wouldn't notice. But because we've got so little data, we need to fix that. So we're going to go to the UV editing tab. There's going to be a lot of switching tabs, zooming in and out of views, I'm afraid. And we're going to look at, if we select this face, we can then see which edge it is, and it's this one. So we could do this by hand, and we'll start that way. We're going to select the vertex and pick this up, and then we're just going to use the G key to drag it, and you will see this straighten out. I'm going to do the same thing here. And now we've got a straight edge to work on. The other option, I'll just undo that, is if we selected both of these vertices, right-clicked and choose Align Auto. And we'll do the same thing here. And that's just going to straighten the edge, and it would make sense to do it here as well. So now we go back to texture paint, and you can see it's actually shifted our UVs up. So we're going to fix that, and we can just paint kind of loosely the shape in that we want. And we're going to have to use, pretty much from the start, we're going to have to start making decisions on our own. We can't just follow the blueprints because they're not going to match up. So I think maybe I want this to go a little bit higher. So I'll maybe do something like that and see how it's looking. And then generally pretty good, I think, but I either want this to be a less sharp drop off, maybe something like that. And then also I just want to bring in the badge inset, so something, I think just the two will do that. Great. So that's that part of the grill in. And let's tackle the headlights as well. So I like to work pretty fast and loose and then tighten and fix the mistakes as we go. So let's try and get this to follow as best we can. But again, you'll see we can't have a super smooth curve because there just isn't enough information. And that's kind of the point. That's the whole point of doing it in pixel art, is we want that faceted stepped effect. Okay, so I know I want to be rough with this kind of area. And I think I'm actually going to flatten the bottom of the lights so that they run along this edge. Because again, we've got a polygon there. So let's go with that for now. And whilst we're here, let's just fill in this vent here on the front. So I don't think we've done too bad a job with those lights. There's a little edge here that is not painted in, and I think we'll go into the UV map to do that. So we're just going to do that. I don't think we need to straighten these UVs yet. I might put in another pixel here, just continue that line around. I think this could be a bit later transitioning up, and maybe we'll try something like this and like that. But it's all just trial and error, and it's whatever works for you. I think that looks pretty good. So now what I want to do is put some highlights in, and again, like all pixel art stuff, it's good to have a set of rules that we're following. So I'm going to have every top edge above an inset having a highlight along it. So we'll run that highlight down, and remember it's always mirroring on the other side. And then I think I'll actually put in a slight shadow line there. And then we'll come back to this part, but I'm going to paint a shadow in there eventually. Let's do the same on these parts. Oh, clumsy. Accidentally switched colour there. And you can see already what a difference that's making. Like, it's giving a sense of depth. And let's see what happens if we paint in. I'd like a highlight on this edge too. So you can see we're going to have to straighten this out as well because it's going over the edge. Or maybe you're happy with that effect. You know, these are all your decisions to make. But let's rough this in for now. It's pretty good everywhere else. I think it's just a slight UV tweak at the top. I'm just going to keep working around. And we're going to have to do pay some attention there, or we could just step it down like this. Nice. Let's fill in these edges, and we'll do our shadows. And maybe I want a more pronounced shadow on this side because it steps in more on that point. And we'll go back to our shadow here. And you can see already, like, we are starting to get just a sense of depth to this that isn't there already. And, you know, from a distance, it's starting to look quite detailed already. So let's just have a look at this front bumper, see if there's anything we can do. So we're going to UV edit, and we can actually just select these vertices here. And if I just move it up slightly, so maybe if I move this one up, I'm actually working on the wrong bit. Let's ignore that. This is the other part of the bumper, so it's this one. It's always a little gotcha. So we'll just pull that up. And we'll pull that down slightly. We actually need these to be straight, so it needs to be like this. And then we're just going to have to get in and edit our back into texture paint mode. Remove that. So there's no way around it. There is a lot of stopping and starting and tackling different parts. Let's paint in the strip along the bottom. But as we go, as we work out which bits of the UV maps need fixing, you only have to do it once, and then you're done. So we're going to have to do the same at the bottom here, just to straighten this out. And they're all lessons to learn for the future as well. Like when you want a UV unwrap, again, you'll know what to look for. And I'm at a point now where I can fix these things before I get to texture painting because I know what to look for. But again, I didn't want to gloss over the process. So I'll just carry on painting this. There's a little front splitter lip. I think that was pretty good for the most part, but I'm just going to see if I want to fix that because it is stepping up a bit. It's uneven. Although, honestly, I think for this, probably okay. But if you did want to change it, go into UV editing, and it's this bottom part. Let's just look at, in fact, let's just select all of these. Right click, align auto. So then it's just straightened all of that out for us. And I think what I'll do is I'll also put a little highlight on the top of that lip so that it feels like it's sticking out more. Let's go to our black and let's make it slightly. Let's just see if that's okay. I don't think that's really achieving anything here. Let's leave it black for now. We will add in a highlight at a later point. Okay, I'm going to just save incremental and let's tackle the next part. Okay, so now let's jump in and start adding in some crease lines. So we're going to go to our front view, and I feel like this is where things start coming together a bit. So we're going to select our crease line color, which is this one. Make sure our brush is small, and we can just start adding in. And again, it's not going to sit exactly on the blueprints because we don't have enough space. So let's run this line across, and we're going to fix this issue on the side. Let's come back to this top part. So we'll just run this across as well. Nice. Let's do this one here as well. So it's going to be something like this. And we've also got two little lines here that we want to add in. So don't think we've got quite enough space. And we're just going to freestyle this. So something like this. Oh, on there. And then we're going to want one here as well. Might end up. Let's see if we can do it like that. So I'm just going to paint out some of the light. And again, we're just making stylistic choices now to get the effect that we want. But okay, maybe we'll have a little bit of that back in there. Yeah, I think that works. Okay, and then we'll just, whilst we're here, we'll just paint our highlight line on the top of this. And put a shadow line in here, I think. It's already starting to come together. Okay, back to our front view. And let's paint in, so we want this edge here. And we've kind of already got, let's see how that's looking. We just have to try things out and see if they work. Yeah, I think that's okay. And we're just going to join up this gap because it's a little bit hard to do in the front view. So we can already see we're going to have to fix the UVs here. So let's tackle that now before we go any further. So UV editing tab, and we'll select this face, and we're going to vertex mode. And I'm just going to pull this one up. So you can see it is straightening out, but now our lines are not correct at the top, but that's okay. The bottom is okay. So we're just going to go back into texture paint, and you know the drill by now. We'll remove this one. Remove this one, and we'll paint in our highlight again. Still not quite right. Are we going to fix that? Yeah. So we've actually overstepped now. It's always just tweaking to get it looking right. And then let's go back to texture paint. So don't worry about the top of that bumper yet. We will fix it. And we're going to continue this line across, so make sure you've got your crease color selected. And we'll go across like this. And then let's try using another tool to get this line down. So if we go to stroke and change the strokes method from space to line, we should be able to then drag a diagonal line. But you can see the stepping's kind of irregular, and then I'm not sure it's going to give me what I want here. Okay, it's worth a go. We'll use that later on. So I'm actually going to go back into the 3D space for this, even though it seems a bit of an odd choice. I'm just going to make my line step down 1 pixel at a time. And if you find it's not always applying a pixel when you click, you can increase the size of your brush. That usually fixes it. So let's delete this. And then we're going to just offset another line. Do the same thing, maybe like here. So we've gone really off script now. We're just improvising this, but that is okay. That is what pixel art is about. It's about making something, could you remember that that is not what a Subaru Impreza front split event looks like? If you can, you're an even bigger nerd than me, and I salute you. Okay, and bring our highlight around. And then I think I want to highlight this edge as well. Always just undoing if I make a mistake, or going back and painting with the original brush. And then let's give the impression that this is stepped out more. So let's just use that darker shade in there as well. And we should have room to do one here as well. So I think they're called canards. My guess is that's from the French canard. Looks like a wing. That sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, that's looking nice. And you got a bit of bonus French thrown in. And let's continue our... No, I don't think I want to do that actually. I was going to continue our darker shadow, but I think we're okay. We can continue that highlight across. And this is really starting to take shape now. You can see the basic forms coming in. There's one more set of wings on this front bumper that I want to capture. So we have a lot of pixels to work with, but these are kind of rounded. So let's try just painting a highlight in. And we're going to have to make them not in the place that they are, if that makes sense, because we don't have enough pixels to work with. So let's just paint, make sure our brush is a single pixel width. That still looks pretty chunky. There we go. I think I want it a bit lower. So we're going to do something like this. And we'll do this one. And I think if I just offset it like that, and we could always try, I don't know if this is going to work. Could round it very slightly so it feels bigger at the top. No, I think I prefer it just being a single strip. So we'll do that one. And then we'll just work out where the one underneath it needs to go. I think it could be a little higher up. Like that. And I'll repeat that underneath. Okay, I'm just going to paint in a few quick bonnet lines, and then I think I'm kind of happy with that you've got a sense of what's involved in this. I will show you the next part of the process. Like I said, I'm going to do a small part of the car for now, and then I will upload a longer tutorial where I go through all the steps. So in the front view, I can't actually see my blueprints anymore. So if we go to our blueprint section and choose top view, but we actually need to come out of texture paint just to test this, and then choose this image tab. If we go to the top view, should be able to pull this to the front using the depth button, and then we can see it again. So let's go back to texture paint. And now we need to make sure we've got our car body selected. And then I'm just going to paint in a couple of quick lines because you know what we're doing now. So back to our texture paint tool. We're in object mode at the moment, so texture paint. Back to our bonnet crease. Sorry, our crease color. And then let's just freestyle this line for now. It's pretty good. And we'll freestyle this one. This would normally be my approach to kind of freestyle the line. That's pretty messy. And then work out what needs smoothing. So let's have a look at everything. So this line needs to come all the way across. And then we're just going to go back to our default value and just make sure this is 1 pixel thick everywhere. Look at the rules that we're going to make. So I don't like ever having double thickness on a single crease. And you'll find that just doing this really smarts up the line. Okay, so that's already looking better. And then we're just going to see if there's any spaces where this is doing the same thing. So I really want this to be an in-depth tutorial, but unfortunately with any kind of painting stuff, you have to make some decisions at some point, and it's never going to be an exact match for what I do unless you, I don't know, freeze frame every shot in the video and work out where I did what I did. But it's important to just get on with it, make the mistakes. And, you know, I've painted quite a lot of these now, but I'm still coming up with new techniques the whole time, and each one gets better and more efficient. And you kind of learn little workflows that make sense and give you the results that you want. Things a little bit busy around here, so we just need to make sure we're not deleting anything we don't want. But what I really like about pixel art is it's very methodical. It's almost like another form of 3D modeling. Like you can just keep refining and tweaking. And does that bonnet line go all the way down the front? I think it does. Yeah, so we need to continue that line. And then, you know the deal, if it's a case of working out where you want to put the highlights on this. I think definitely want one on this inside edge. Got my brush set a bit big. So I'm just going to do this one and then we'll stop. But once I get into a zone, oh, we'll fix this lower bumper. So once I get into a zone, I just find myself constantly adding bits and refining it, and, you know, suddenly hours have gone. Yeah, you can see it's got some depth to it now. Class, looking really good. Okay, let's have a look at this tricky front bumper. So we're going to UV editing, and we're going to work out which one we're dealing with. So I think for the most part, I mean, we could just absolutely straighten this edge up completely, and that might help. We're going to have to repaint all of this, so don't worry about what you're seeing on the screen at the moment. So these are all the front edge, and these are all the back edge. Let's use our old Align Auto friend, and we'll do the same with these three. And we'll do the same with these. And this one. So where this gets us, so we'll go back into texture paint. And start with, we're just going to use our default value and paint this out. And then let's try, so maybe we want this edge to be highlighted. Let's take our brush size down a little bit. And you can see that it's automatically following the curve because we straightened it out. So that's where we come a bit unstuck. So let's carry on painting this bit for now, and then we'll fix the other bit. And if I sound like I don't have a plan, it's because I don't have a plan at the moment, but I never have a plan, and you just work it out. So we could just straighten this again. Let's see what happens. And at some point we are going to have to paint a diagonal line, and that's fine. But so we're definitely cheating here, but I think this is good enough. And we could actually, just to help it not look quite so fake, we could put an extra step in there. I'm trying to work on a MacBook trackpad, which is not ideal, but it does show that you can do this with any setup. So maybe something like this, and let's just fix that again. What's going on here? Zoom in. I think this is a UV issue more than anything else, so select these two, but we don't want to move that one, we want to move this one. So in fact, let's just texture paint straight onto the UV map instead. That should fix it. Yep, there we go. Nice. Okay, so I am just going to save my work here. And then let me explain the next part. So why have we done this like this? Well, we've already talked about the fact that if I wanted to change the color of the car, and we'll go into texture paint, and let's say we wanted a yellow impreza, and then I hit the fill button, we can do that without ruining all of our work. So you can easily generate multiple variations. But what I also want to do is bring in 2 new layers. So I want to bring in a details layer, which is going to be things like the headlights and the grills, things that are not going to be tinted by the base color. And then I want to do the same thing with like a liveries or design layer that will then sit behind, sort of sit under the details layer, so that you're not, so things like windows and headlight glass don't get affected by what's underneath. Again, usual catchphrase of this channel, it will make more sense as we get into it. So let's just take all of these and move them over. And actually I want my multiply here. So we're going to make another image texture, Shift A, image texture, new, 256, 256. I'm going to call this details. And this time we do want to change color. We want to set the alpha to 0. And I think we can leave everything else as is. Hit new, and then make sure you change it to closest. So now if I view this layer, we've got that kind of PNG checkerboard effect in the corner, and that means it's transparent. So what we're going to do is this might take a little bit of fiddling around because I usually get these mixed up. We're going to take the output of this and put it into a mix color. And then we're going to take the color from here and put it into slot B. And then we're going to put all of this into base color. And nothing should change because essentially we're putting a transparent through. And even if we move the factor, nothing changes. We're going to hook the alpha from this into the factor. And what that should do is if we then paint, let's go back to texture painting, but we're also going to make sure we've definitely got the details layer selected. That's very important. So now if I paint, still got my fill tool selected. If I paint, it shouldn't seem any different, but you'll see actually what's happening here is not what's meant to be happening yet. So we're going to change that. It's still interacting with the value layer, which we don't want. So we just need to make sure that this is set to mix instead. There we go. Okay, so again, this maybe doesn't seem that sensible, but we need a layer that isn't interacting with anything underneath it so that all of our whites and bold details remain sharp. Okay, so I'm going to go back to texture paint. And you can see now that we're painting entirely on a transparent area. So let's delete what we've just done. So I'm going to use my erase brush. And let's go. And let's start by putting in a grill at the front. So it has this kind of slatted grill. And another thing that I like to do is make another palette. So you can have multiple palettes here. So if we just X this off, and then make a new palette. Same way we're making the interior, and we'll call it Details Palette. So now you can choose your Values palette, you can choose your Details palette, which is blank, and let's give myself this kind of colour. I'm just going to use for the grill, and I think I'm just going to freehand this in 3D view. So start at the bottom, and we'll do. I'm still in a race. Definitely watch out for that. Happens to me all the time. And we'll just paint in a grill like this. Oop. And again, maybe this is not completely accurate to the Impreza, but I actually think it doesn't go all the way up. Or does it not go all the way down? It's one of the two. Let's have a look at our reference. Yeah, it stops there. So we'll go with that. And then also let's just paint in our badge at the front. And I might just bring in some other little shades of grey, just to kind of give it a bit of detail, a bit of a metallic feel. Maybe a bit more like that. Yeah, I'll revisit that. It's maybe not quite how I want it to look, but it's a start. Okay, and then let's have a look at the headlights. And again, we kind of need to just put in a basic shape and then see how it sits in 3D. So let's just mark kind of roughly where these lights are going to go. And then let's view them in 3D. So actually, we're not a million miles away with this, I don't think. So I think this one wants to be more over here. And maybe we'll go for this kind of shape. So it's implying a bit of roundness, but we don't have the pixel information to go fully round. And this is actually like a scoop rather than lens glass. So let's paint in. And you'll notice that I'm not saving to my palette, which I should be, but I will show you how we can sample these colors again if we need them. So what we can do is we can zoom in on our UV map and use the eyedropper tool to make sure that we're picking up that color again, and then we'll just add it into our palette. And let's give ourselves a bit of a darker shade in there. Try and give the impression of like an inset. And likewise, I just want to sample this top color again. I forgot to save it, so we'll just add that. Oh, no, that's the same one again. Okay, so that was obviously the right color that I wanted. So we've got the kind of scoopy bits. I'll just try a slightly darker shade along here and see how that looks. Barely notice it. I don't think it's worth it, but... Oh, I actually quite like that. So, yeah, we'll go with that, and we'll just add that into our palette. We'll just select this one, use the minus key to get rid of it. And then also for the headlights, let's just put in some pure white in there. And let's just try something like that, just to give a sense of like glass and reflections. Great. Okay, and then we've got like a little indicator lens that goes here, I think. Let's just go to our blueprints. So this sits here. And it's going to be nothing more than a square, but... And then I'm going to switch back to the value layer and we'll just paint in the highlights and the shadows on this again because it's kind of recessed. So back to shading, back to value, texture paint, and just always keep an eye that you've got what you're expecting. And we'll switch our palette back to value palette. So this is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to paint a highlight on the top. And a soft shadow, I think, along the bottom. And then maybe this whole thing just becomes a bit more shaded and then a bit less shaded. Yeah, so you can see now we've got like a little recessed indicator. Okay, so now I'm just going to add in one more layer. And we need to think about where this comes. So let's add in another base color. Sorry, image texture. Keep it to, and we'll call it livery. And again, we want alpha turned on. And then this is going to overlay. We want this under the value. So we're going to run a mix color out of here. And then connect the livery and the alpha into there. And then patch that into B. Again, nothing should noticeably change. And then if you go to texture paint and, let's pick some Subaru yellow. And if we start painting our livery, it's not going to cut into our details. So you're now free to, you'll notice that this is looking a bit soft and blurry. And that is because I haven't set closest. So you can see that livery is interacting with the creases as it would do, but it's not interacting with hard details. So let's go to our shading and change this to closest. And there you go. That should give you everything that you need to follow this workflow. We've got all of our layers set up now. So I'm going to make another tutorial on how we do the wheel because it's a slightly different technique for that. They're a bit of a headache in pixel art, and I have a few suggestions about how you might want to tackle that. I really hate this horrible livery. Let's just get rid of that. Okay, so this video is intended to be a bit standalone. So if you're following the full tutorial, you don't need this, but I'm going to go through the process of painting all of the rest of the car, doing all of the details. Don't know how long it's going to be. It's going to take us some time. So, you might want to bounce around. You might want to skip it. What we're not going to do in this video is we're not going to do the wheels. That's going to be a separate video. And I will show you later on how we're going to optimize it into a more game-ready texture. But for now, we're just going to get into the slightly slow process of painting the entire car. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to expand out this window. So I'm going to pull up from the bottom. And I'm going to zoom out on my UV map because I don't need that so much. But you can see at the moment I've got my base layer selected, and what I actually want is my value layer. So it's going to be a bit tough for me on a little screen, but I'm going to switch this to shader editor. And then I'm going to hit the N key to hide all the stuff to the side. And then I should have all my layers here. So this one is my livery layer, which I'm not going to touch. It's my base layer. This is my value layer. So I want to be working on my value layer at the moment and make sure I've got my value palette up. And I'm just going to push this window to the side a bit more for now. So I've got more space to work. I'm really missing my big screen at the moment, but hey, it's good for showing everything. So we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're just going to start painting in the value to mark all the panels on the car. And I find the best way is to just work roughly and freehand and sketching the lines. And don't worry if parts break off or you get double pixels, because you're going to correct all of this by hand. And it's actually a lot easier to do with the blueprints out of the way. So it looks chaotic and messy at the moment, but so let's just paint in these parts, and then I'll show you what I mean. So I already know my rules are I want these to only be 1 pixel thick. So we're just going to take this back, and I don't ever want an overlap like that. And immediately that kind of smooths out my curve and looks better. Let's do the same down here. And then these should absolutely only be 1 pixel thick. I think I've just got my brush set a bit thick actually. So we'll just scale that down with the square brackets. And so we're just painting this edge. I don't know how much I'm going to talk through this tutorial. I think there will come a point where me explaining every single thing I'm doing gets a bit much for everyone, but I'll keep up the chat for now. Maybe I'll think of some interesting stories to tell as I go. Okay, and then we're going to paint in our highlights. At some point we need to start coming up with some rules about where, let's try and make this a bit neater, where we want our highlights to be. So it's also a decision to make. I could have run this along this polygon line and maybe that would have made sense, but I think when it's rendered and viewed from far away, I don't think you'll actually notice that these lines don't quite match up. So I'm going to assume that this is kind of sticking out a little bit and catching the light, but I don't think this one would be. I'm going to come back to doing the highlights on these later. And now let's just carry on putting in our edges. Halfway through, I'm just going to zoom out and check and see how everything's looking. So for the most part, we're already looking nice. It's adding a bit of depth and interest. Okay, and we'll snap back to the side here. For some reason, I always rotate the wrong way. Again, apologies if that's maddening, but let's see what happens if we use our line tool just to show you again. So change that to line, and I'm going to try and pick up this one and drag across. And it's actually done quite a good job there. So look at how it's looking. So I'm just going to clean up the double spacing. So we'll get that. You might decide on some completely different rules, and you should absolutely go with that if you feel it looks better with a different spacing. These are just the rules that I like to work to. So I'll change it back to line. Don't know why I didn't do this whole line in one go, but okay, it's not helped me out so much there, but that's what I'm aiming for. And then I think I'm going to try and do this one in a few goes, and it's doing okay for the most part. It's definitely going to need some cleanup. I think if I step that slightly above. Let's finish it off there. Okay, that's not too bad. It's a little bit of the back end's looking a little bit wobbly, but I think the front for the most part is okay. And the other good thing is this is all being done on the back, on the side as well, on the other side. So I'm only having to do this once. I'm going to leave this back window for now. I'm just going to keep putting in our guidelines. So do something like that. And let's do our door handles. And as we keep saying, like, nothing is set in stone. If things need to be different as we move forward, then we'll just change it up. But there's no point in obsessing about getting it perfect until you need to. And let's see what happens if I bring this line across. Okay, so we're going to go back to the 3D view and see what we need to clean up, but I think we've made some decent progress there. Yeah, that top line's not so good. I might just move that for now. So that's looking pretty good. If at any point you're looking at this and thinking, this doesn't look good, that's understandable, but it will. We'll get there. Just connect that up. Connect that up for now. And I am going to run a line across like this. That's too thick. Let's zoom in and make sure our brush is small. And maybe we will just do a freehand run, trying to use the line tool. Something like that. Now, let's put in a highlight along this wing. So this is the other thing with my workflow. After a while, I just start working on whichever bit interests me at that time, rather than having a methodical approach to the order at which I do things. So I'll just clean this up. We might need to get in and change our UVs a little bit, but come on. There's a bit of overlap here. Seems like there is. So let's look at our UVs. I'll go into our UV tab. Something is not happy here. Yeah. So I've done a bit of a dodgy unwrap here, but it's easily fixed. So you can see we've got two sets of things. Let's just make sure this is turned off. UV sync causes all sorts of things. So we're going to go back in and just select these. And then we're going to move these vertices up out of the way. And that should fix some of the issues. And we can just bring this up, down. Okay, and now I'll just paint back in that top highlight. Could be overspill. Let's fix that. But at least we're not directly overlapping anymore. I think for this, that looks fine. I'm okay with that. Let's paint in a crease line here. Brush is too thick again. Nice. Let's see if there's any obvious other panels on the front that we need to bring in. So this actually connects to the light. So it'll be something like this. And then we need to look at how we're going to put our bonnet line in here. But let's tackle that in a second. Yeah, I think that works. Okay, we're making some progress here. You can definitely see the shape of the car coming in. So let's do the roof now. And definitely one of my least favourite parts is the windscreen surround, which I'm going to paint in black. And I'm also going to put off for a second. I'm going to do this nice easy wind first. So these are the rubber strips on the roof. And I'm going to make these 2 pixels thick, but let's get our basic shape in first. And I'm already breaking my own rules about spacing, but so we'll just tidy this up and then we'll double the thickness. And there we go. And we're probably going to continue that line down for the back windscreen, but nice chunky black line. And what we could do is we could actually, let's have a look at our colours. Maybe we're just going to bring in a more highlighty colour. See how that looks. Oh. Maybe I'll use this one. No, I'm going to have to add that in on the details pass, which is maybe where these should belong, actually. maybe I'm going to repaint these on the detail layer because we want the livery to sit underneath them. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to undo all of that. A waste of time. And let's go to our details and just redo all that work we've just done. But you know my rule, we leave in the mistakes. We don't edit them out. Unless it gets really confusing for everyone, usually me. Okay, and because this is now on the detail layer, I can use a lighter grey to highlight. So let's say the highlight's going to be along here. That's too light. Let's pick another grey. Something down here. And we'll just move it up. Oh, where's my black gone? Blender doing Blender things there, I think. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So we'll paint in here. That should actually have a pixel there. Because these things aren't completely flat. And it's nice to have a bit of depth to them. So it's a couple of little things to watch depending on which layer you're working on. So because this is the details layer, I can't just paint the value back in. So I have to use the erase brush for this. And now if we go back to our value layer, we could also paint in a bit of a recess, like a shadow here. And you'll notice I'm very zoomed in to do this, so I actually have no sense of how the whole lot looks. And this might look awful, but let's try it. No, I think it looks good. I like that. It's got a bit of 3D depth to it. So let's rough in. Let's go back to the detail layer. Apologies, it's going to be really hard for you to see which layer I'm working on, but you'll get the idea. And let's start painting in our windscreen. And I don't want it to sit right on the edge of the polygon because it doesn't look great if I do that. And I think the best bet is actually to just freestyle this completely, not follow the blueprints too closely, and actually follow this polygon shape we've got. So let's start with that. And I don't want it to be 1,000 pixels thick, but okay, so we're just going to alternate between erasing and painting in. And I think we might need to tweak our UVs a little bit because it's pinching up here. But let's get our basic shape in first. So far, it's looking promising. I've already changed my mind about that. Let's go with something like that. I'm quite happy with this base shape. Maybe it needs to, having said that, I think it needs to follow more of this line. So let's take this out. Yeah, that's better. And it would be slightly thicker at the bottom, I think, but so this looks a little bit janky. Let's see if there's anything we can do around here. So I think I just want to continue this down a bit. So we get maybe this. Oh, we're 3 pixels deep there. I don't want that. I think this actually needs to be stepped in 2 goes. You know, not bad for a first pass at this. Maybe we could just round the top off a little bit. It's not quite so severe, so just need to work out how we need to adjust that curve to reflect that. Does this need to come out even further? I think it does, you know. Sorry, I'm sure it's quite annoying to watch me constantly changing my mind, but remember, you're not trying to emulate me exactly. Maybe we'll go with that for now. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. The only bit that's off is this part here. So let's just, I think it needs another pixel in there. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, and then I'm going to add in another color for my window. So I want like a dark, really dark blue. Something like that. And then we're just going to use a big brush. Paint it in, and then we've obviously got to be careful when we go over the line, so we're going to use a big brush to start with. And then we'll start going smaller and refining. Being bold here. I'm seeing how much I can get away with. Okay, we've flown very close to the sun here. I don't know why, but when you start filling in the windows, even though they're probably my most hated part, especially if you use a nice dark shade, it really helps the model come together. Bingo. Nice. From the front view, we're making some real progress here. I'm going to take this opportunity to save it. Remember, you can get all of these incremental stages as I go on my Patreon. I really find this front badge irritating. I think I'm going to use like Japanese impreza color. So let's just put in a pink badge here. Yeah, there we go. Much better. Okay, let's do our bonnet scoops. And I know I'm going to have to fix a lot of the UVs here, but let's go straight in. I forgot the separate objects. So we'll go back to object mode, texture paint, and whoa, craziness. So let's go and fix these UVs. What's going on here? There we go. So let's select these two, right click, apply auto. These two, right click, apply auto. And now I should have a much straighter edge to work from. I don't love how tight that is to the top, so I might be able to just move my UVs the cross side. So let's just select everything. Yeah, that's better. And then I'm just going to erase some of these. So I want to strip down the middle. That's too thick. Something like that. And then one either side. Look at that. Classic impressive bonnet vent. So now let's go back to our value layer and just paint in our usual highlights. And again, there's going to be some fixing to do for sure, but so let's run a highlight along, make sure we're in pixel art mode. And then I'd like to run them along the top as well. Oh, that's worked out nicely. It's a little bit scruffy, but I think it's okay. So from a distance, that's looking really nice. What we could also do is we could actually paint a shadow on the bonnet. So let's go back to object mode, back to texture paint, and let's use this shadow. And we're just going to use paint underneath. And there you go, we've got some real depth to that, like a baked in shadow. So now I want to just join up my roof strips because it doesn't really make sense for them not to continue all the way down. So we're going to go back to our details layer and we're going to use our black, and I think we can just sort of, so actually make sure we selected the black and continue that down. Is that the right shade? I think so. I think it's the lighting. Yep. And then we just need to go back to our value and paint in our darker shadow there. So what should we do next? Shall we do our back window? And again, I think this is going to be one where it makes more sense to just freehand it without really kind of following the blueprints, but it follows the shape of the polygons pretty closely. So let's run details. Finding the shadow from the room a bit distracting, and I could just hide the real wing for now. So we'll just work on this. Use the backslash key. So I might have this starting a bit higher up. And then I think I just want this whole thing to be a bit lower down. So we have something like this, and then we're going to need to just remove. But that one's okay. Maybe something like that. It feels a bit chunky compared to the front, but yeah, I think once it's filled in, it'll look okay. There's definitely some uneven parts though, so that needs to be like this. That needs to be like that. And then same deal, I want this to be a bit more rounded at the top. So maybe that. And then let's just fill this in our... Now, did we save our window color? We did not. So we're going to use our eyedropper tool on our UV map. And then we're going to use a big brush and fill this in. And we're going to make sure we're not in erase. I guarantee there'll be lots of times when you're clicking and nothing happens, and it will either be because you haven't got the actual object that you're painting on selected, you're painting on the wrong layer, or you've got an erase tool set. And before we go any further, let's add that into our palette. Okay, and then let's continue our roof strips. So same deal, you just want to terminate in a sensible place. That's not the right shade. That's the right shade. And we've got an extra pixel in there that we now need to erase because we can't paint that over the value. Then back to value and paint in our shadow. What's happening here? Oh, we've got erase pixel on. See, it told you it'd be something obvious. So now let's pick the right shadow color. And I was wondering what was going on there, but it's because... So let's actually just clean this up because it's just bad practice. So with that hidden, I can now go in and make sure we are on the details layer, and I want the erase tool. And we can just remove those and it won't affect the shadow. There we go. So let's finish off this bit by doing the roof scoop. So it's exactly the same process. And we want to be on the details layer, and we want to be in texture paint. All of these things are applied. This object mode needs to be changed back to texture paint. That's why I've got the tools. So we're in erase. See, I'm doing it every time just to show you all the mistakes you will definitely make. I would never make these mistakes normally. Absolutely not. So I want to give it a little bit of a rounded shape. But I don't want it to be that tight in on the edge. So we're going to tweak our UV slightly. So it's literally just one face to change. And if we go view, frame selected. So let's give it a bit more headspace. And let's align them as well. And let's give it a bit more side space as well. So we are cheating. We are changing the amount of pixel density, which is not really in the spirit of it, but it does make our work a lot cleaner. And then we're going to go back to our value layer. And we're going to paint in our highlights. I actually don't mind that spilling over. Yes, I do. I don't want it to spill over. Let's just paint in. Why are you painting so many? There we go. Really don't want to get that middle bit here. So, bound to be a UV issue, but there we go. And we'll do our edges too. Not way too thick. Okay, so I definitely got some issues here. Let's paint roughly what we want, and then we'll fix the UVs too. I mean, that actually I think that looks okay. We could tweak it if you really want it to be, you know, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right, isn't it? So all we need to do is pick up these UVs, just move them in slightly on that edge. And let's go back to object mode and let's paint in a shadow on this edge as well. So with that selected, back to texture paint. I'm sure there's a better way of doing that. If you know a quicker way of just picking up something, please let me know, because I spend a lot of time switching back and forth. Something like that. Something like that. And there's our roof scoop looking good as well. Okay, time for another save. Okay, so let's get into painting the windows and the window frame exactly like we did on the windscreen and the rear window. So we go back to our details layer, and we're just going to carry on the same process. So I've got these in as cut lines, but actually they're guidelines for how I want this to flow. And there's a few little things to fix, but so I think I'm going to make these 2 pixels deep again. And we're just going to work our way down. So there's probably less talking to be done in this part, because I think what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to hide this mirror for a second. So we'll go into object mode and use the backslash key to solo it. And then we'll go back into texture paint so I can just see the body shell. And I can see how this flows down. I'm just going to make my brush a little bit bigger because it's struggling to pick it up. So let's just start by outlining everything. And, oh, bit clumsy there. This is going to be filled, but sometimes it's quicker to just undo the strokes that you've done rather than... This is the real challenge of using a trackpad. And yeah, that's going to be filled, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I've broken my rule there, but... Oh, sorry. Let's try something together and see if it works. What happens if I use the filter? No. Okay. Sometimes I find that it does a non-contiguous fill, and sometimes it does a contiguous fill. So it's definitely a setting I haven't worked out yet. You can look forward to an exciting tutorial in the future when I've worked out how it works. And, you know, I could have paused the video, gone away, learned how to do it, and then claimed that I always knew. But you know this channel, I leave the mistakes in. It's all about the honesty. It's all about what I do and don't know. And hopefully somebody will pop up in the comments and tell me what we're doing wrong. Then we're all learning. Okay, so we're just going to zoom out and check that looks okay. Yep, looking nice. So let's fill in our center pillar. Is this the B pillar? I think the one on the windscreen is the A pillar, and then I think whatever you have dividing the rear window is the C pillar. Exciting car knowledge. And then we're just going to double up the thickness here, so just work our way around. And the reason I don't paint both thickness at once is because my brain isn't smart enough to work out how it's double stepped without breaking the flow, if that makes sense. I have to have my thin line first, and then I can easily see I've confused myself there. So that needs to be, yep, and that. And then this is a bit easier, even my brain can deal with this. So I'll fill that through. And we'll just pick up the erase tool. So we'll go back to pixel art, erase. I think something I'd like to do in the future is work out some shortcuts or learn the actual techniques between swapping the tools, because I'm sure there's a way of having, but it's something as simple as like you push Alt and you erase a pixel. Should we try it? It's not as simple as that. I know that Control alternates between the two colors, so I do use that one, and we'll use that shortcut in the future, but let's just do this before I forget to do it, because I will forget. So that's double thickness. This is where it gets confusing, because we're now doing it on the outside edge, so it should be that, I think. Doesn't feel great. I think that's right. Let's zoom out and see how it looks. Will we just delete that? It looks a little bit jagged. Does it actually need to be that? No, definitely not that. All right, let's go with this for now, and we will work back if it's not correct. I think we're just missing. I think we need that. Yeah, from the kind of distance we're going to be seeing things, that looks fine. Okay, and then one last thing I want to do is this part should actually be, so the mirror should sit on essentially a bit of black trim as well. Okay, and what we can do now, I know how I set up my curve, but it looks a little bit wrong. So we could just, I think I'm just going to adjust my mirrors actually, not in the driving sense, obviously. So we'll just pull these down a little bit, maybe forward a bit too. And go back into the texture paint. And it's not letting me paint because I've not got the right object selected. Okay, and then what we're going to do is going to select our mirror. And we should just be able to use fill now. Make sure you're back in texture paint mode. Okay. The many quirks of Blender. Still got the body shell selected. It's just doing this to make it look stupid, isn't it? There we go. And now our mirrors are black as well. And interestingly, it's spilled a little bit onto the base here, so let's fix that. I don't know why it's done that. Back out of fill mode, into erase mode. There we go. Nice and neat and clean. Okay, so now we can fill in our window color, which is this slightly blue shade. Guess what I haven't done? Here we go, back to texture paint. And we're still in erase. That's the other thing. Okay, I'm using quite a big brush, but then, bottling out when it comes to the edges, and just using the most square brackets keys to change my brush size, which is handily the same shortcut as in Photoshop, so it's so etched into my muscle memory. You wouldn't believe I've been using Photoshop for, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years now. I think it's probably the application that I could use blind without a keyboard and mouse. I need a keyboard, but I could just do it on shortcuts. That's such an exciting brag. Okay, so that's one window done. And we're going to paint in some highlights in a minute because everything's looking a bit flat at the moment, but base colors first, then highlights, and then your value. So in big spaces, big brushes. It's a real test if you can like use a round brush and still just get into your edges like that. Oh, look at that. That's going to be too big. I'm flying too close to the sun here. Who am I trying to kid? I'm sure this would be a lot easier with a tablet, but it's surprisingly doable with just a tiny trackpad on the MacBook. Although you haven't seen my hands, you haven't seen the gnarled pixel art claws that I'm developing. I've been working on like a complete car pack, and this is one of them. So there will be 5 pixel art, sort of retro 90s, 2000 rally cars for your own game projects, and they're coming in a variety of liveries and stuff, and it's looking cool. I'm pleased with how it's progressing, but yeah, it's a big old workout. Okay, so now I want to just give some depth to this rubber strip. So it would be kind of highlighted at the top. I think maybe, is that too strong a highlight? We'll use this one. Yeah, it feels better. I think this is going to be a highlight color on anything that is pure black. Before I go any further, how does that match up? I think actually we do need to use yeah, that's the shade we've been using for this. So it's subtle, but it just gives like a little bit of depth to. And again, these are just artistic choices. Like you might decide you don't want your pixel art to have this super pseudo 3D effect to it. You might be a purist, and I'm not judging you for that, but I like gimmicks, and I like shiny things, and when those two things align, I'm painting a highlight on everything. And you can just see it makes it feel like the window is like more recessed into the car, which it is. It would be. And, you know, not to bang on about how much I love doing this stuff, but you get to make exactly the same decisions using pixel art that you do in 3D art with Blender. That, you know, does something look a bit plain? Okay, I'll bevel it, I'll extrude it, I will do something to, like it was a real turning point in my 3D work when I realized that nothing in life is actually completely flat and sharp. Like, putting in a bevel on an edge just made things look so much more natural, and that applies with pixel art as well. But unless this is particular aesthetic you're going for, nothing should really be flat. And if you look at the rubber strips around the windows on a real car, you know, because you've got literally nothing else to do with your life, you'll notice that they are rounded as well. So we need to carry this over onto the windscreen, and I think that will help as well. Clumsy. Okay, so what we can do here is we can queue up both of our colors. So we're going to select this one. Nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to flip the color and then load in our black. And then when I make a mistake again, which I will, I can just use Control to paint it back to the shade that I need. Except I've immediately put it on the wrong blue, so I'm just going to undo that. There's also some stuff I want to cover in a later tutorial of part of this course. That this setup that we're doing at the moment works in Blender because we've got multiple layers and we can tweak everything as we go. And I think that's absolutely the way to work on a project like this until you don't have to, until you can't any longer. And that point will be when we export it into a game engine and we need we need it all baked into one texture map. So I will show you how to do that. Let's fill all of this in black as well. So this part will be the plastic that the windscreen and stuff sits, not the windscreen wipers, which we're not going to model for this. We are going to model some aerials, and I'll show you a cool technique for doing like essentially transparent parts, but nobody in the PS1 era was doing was doing isolated windscreen wipers. And if you followed any of my other tutorials, you'll know that they're actually my most hated thing to model, and I'm glad we're not doing them. Let's also just let's put a highlight edge that kind of matches this flow pretty well. Just roughing it in because I don't think I've spaced it right. Maybe something like that. Yeah, so that's going to act as like a detail essentially. So let's just give the impression that there's like a bit of trim. It's a bit raised. It's not just one flat part. Let's just try this in the dark. I think I've gone too light with this. Yeah. And also we're going to, so we're just going to use Control to select our black and do the same thing there. So just holding down Control and painting uses your alternate color. Oh dear. Not a good time with this today. Okay, and this is very much where I start to get into the phase of doing things as I see them rather than having any big strategic plans. So let's switch back to our value layer, and I just want to paint in the highlights on this edge as well. And I think I'm going to have it so that the highlight there is suggesting this part is raised slightly, but I would have this part, this bonnet edge, raised slightly. And I want this to feel like a more dramatic edge because this is a physical part of the car that can be opened and lifted. A bonnet, or as the 4 Americans that watch my stuff would call it, a hood. And let's just try, we definitely don't want black. Let's just try putting our darker shadow in as well. So let's give the impression that I'm just changing my mind a bit here. I think maybe this should be the darker shade. Like this. And we need to continue this down. And then I think this should be our slight shadow. Just see how that looks. Yeah, you can see that really gives it like a sense of this is a physical cut into the body. It has depth to it. It's not just like a crease line. We've also got a massive bonnet scoop to paint on the front. We'll do the door handles first, and then I'll show you the technique that I'm going to use because it's the same. Yeah, nice. And again, I'm going to keep saying it, but it's up to you. You might not want. Do you want to run that across like that? Just to, yeah, I think so. I think that makes the bonnet feel much more detached. Okay, so let's run a highlight. Let's carry our highlight along this edge. But we'll put and we're going to do the same thing on the doors now to make them feel more removed. So I'll run that highlight along. I'll go to there for now. And, I spotted another one that just wants, I don't think this wants to be as deep a cut, but it still needs a highlight edge. Yeah, we're really coming together now. So this is like my third time through painting this car because I always practice it, and then I wanted to build one out for the car pack to test everything as well. So I've had a few goes through this now, and I think this is shaping up to be the best one yet, which you'd hope it will be. It'd be worrying if they were getting worse, but there is always the worry that, you've captured lightning in a bottle once. You've made the perfect pixel art impreza, which let's be clear, I definitely did. And then when it's time to sit down in front of the camera and do it, you lose the knack. I didn't realise that these were that the WRC ones were the 4-door impreza as well. Because I am a fragile man, I've always owned 3-door cars because I think they look cooler, but they're not practical. Like it's a stupid way to live your life, especially if you've got friends. And I don't like to brag, but I do. So let's just keep an eye. Yeah, look at that. So you can just see the actual depths of this now. I've been lucky enough to own some fun, weird cars in my time. Like nothing too fancy. I currently don't own a car because I live in a city, and there's two things that living in a city entail. There's nowhere to park your car. You can't drive anywhere. Public transport is good, and you're broke. So all of those things meant that I now don't own a car, but I do spend a lot of time thinking about the next car I would like to own and what that might be. I've never owned a Subaru, but it's definitely something about them. I think, I'm 43. I grew up watching Richard Burns, Colin McRae, Joachim Kankinen, and they're all Subaru boys. And obviously the Colin McRae games. Just going to check if I got that rear door light right, because that looks, clearly I just completely made that up. So it's actually just a straight line down. Interesting. And we are going to have to do something around this wheel arch, but let's not do that yet. Let's just carry on with where we're at. So I'm going to quickly put in our crease line, and our highlight line. And maybe this is just sticking out slightly. I think on the actual WRC car, this would be black, but I'm going to keep it blue for now until I decide what I'm going to do. That's gone very wrong. Okay, let's work some magic on the door handles and let's think about how these might look. So we're going to do this all in value. So we're going to put a highlight there. And yeah, I actually think I want to highlight. Let's do something like this to start with. So I'm just kind of making this up. And then we go for the darker shadow under here. No, we're going to go for the darker shadow under here. Like that. And then we're going to go for the lighter one. I think that's what I want. It's getting there. Let's just paint it. We've got a lot of layers of shadow here we could use, so we could actually go something like that. Yeah, there you go. You can see that actually has like a. I might even just curve this up slightly, but we're going to use the right color to start with. There's something not quite right here, and I don't know what it is. Let's try putting the darker shadow in here as well. Maybe this doesn't want to be that dark. Yeah, I think that's better. But let's make this back to the white. Maybe we'll just run that all the way across. There we go. Yeah, that was a lot of faffing about, but we got there. And I know me, so I will likely change it again in a second, but I know we're going with the darker shadow for here. Maybe if we just paint in. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and then let's quickly add in back to the details layer. And let's add in one tiny pixel to be the door lock. Might go a bit grayer on that, and maybe more under the handle. Yeah, that's better. Okay, I'm going to save again, and then we will look at the back of the car and the roof, the bonnet scoop. So, should we do the bonnet scoop? Because seeing as we've just done that technique, it's going to be exactly the same. So we've already got this crease here. So we're going to go back to our value layer, and we'll start by painting the edge in. And unsurprisingly, I'm not seeing anything, and that's because I'm using the wrong color. So let's put something in to start with. And then we'll switch to our 3D view and see if this actually going to give us what we want. Sorry, I'm going to, let's just go frame all. There we go. Yeah, I don't mind it like that. I think that shape's okay. We should probably just join it all the way up. And then when you think about what this actually looks like, so let's switch back to the top view. I don't have anything on the blueprints, but essentially we want a recess. So this bit is curved in, and then this bit is a sharper drop. So let's use the shadows that we've got for now and our highlights. So this would be a raised lip. We're just going to keep zooming out and see how that looks. But yeah, you can see that there's a cutout there. So let's assume that it's maybe going to go. Is it going to follow this edge? Why not? But this part might be more curved. It might not be such a sharp drop off. And then it's essentially going to do the reverse here. But I think I want it to start on this edge. So we'll bring in this darker. And we might even go darker like that. Yeah, there we go. It's much more of a drop to it. And then we'll just reverse that out. So let's make this edge slightly raised. And we'll just track it back. But we probably won't highlight all the way back. And yep, nice and quick and easy bonnet vent. And you can't really tell the difference between. Should we make this pure black? I'm just thinking because let's just make this absolutely pure black, just so we've got some visual consistency. Yeah, there you go. Okay, that was easy. Nice and quick. We're pretty close now. Except when you turn to the back of the car and we've done nothing. We've achieved nothing. Back to the start. But you know the deal now, so we're just going to paint in quickly where we need stuff. And already we know that we need to fix our bumper. So let's ignore that for a second and see if we can work on here. And let's get roughly where the light's going to go. So fortunately this is a nice flat area. Okay, let's just zoom out and see how we're looking. Looking pretty mad there. I think I'm just going to undo that because I don't know what's happened. So we need to continue this line. So about and let's just carry that there for now. I might fix that. It looks a bit weird, but those are some Subaru shaped lights for sure. So it's always fascinating to me how little information you need before you can start reading something as the car that it is. So another plate goes down there, so there's not much else to put in. Let's try painting in some of this bottom curve. I'm probably going to run this over. Yeah. And things have gone mad on the side, so let's fix that now. Let's paint on the side that we've got our view. So this is like a 3D projection issue that I thought I was painting on the side. On the face it was visible to me, and Blender's like, oh no, you're painting on the side here. So let me fill them with mad pixels that you didn't ask for. I think I want this to be straight, maybe with that lip there. Let's put this in as well. And even though that's angled, that kind of looks cool. It's kind of what I want, so back to our 3D view. Let's just go frame all again. It's easier than pulling out for me. Okay, we're looking ugly, but we are making some progress. So we just need to work out how we're going to join these parts up and we will tweak some vertex to do that, but at the moment that's looking a little bit ugly. Okay, so let's go into our UV editing mode and just fix this rear bumper. And we're going to zoom out, not that much. So it's clearly this bit we're dealing with, so let's just do the old align auto. I think that will, and we'll just do these two because this part is supposed to point down. And we'll go back into texture paint. And just want to make sure this is working. Yep. Okay, so we're just going to paint out this that we've added in. Way too thick. Crazy thick. Something like that, I think. And then let's also mark in at least the edge of this thing. And then also, this is a little bit fiddly, but I'd like to paint this part in, and we'll use some shading because this is where the boot line cuts into the rear bumper. You know, we're not looking too shabby here. We need to do some cleanup, but so we need to work out where this. Oh, in fact, we know that that line doesn't actually go anywhere, so that's okay. So let's start putting some highlights in just to move things along. So I'll highlight this edge, but not like that. I'm doing a great job of this edge. And you'll see that we can't get it exactly into position because we don't have the pixel information for that. So we're going to apparently just paint white everywhere until we get what we want. And then we're going to tweak the UVs again. Let's highlight the top of the boot lid. Actually, let's not. One, because that looks really bad at the moment, but also I've got a different technique I want to use on that. But let's paint the highlight in here. And then maybe we'll use a darker shadow in here. So let's just go back to our blueprints, because you can see that it all pushes back here. So it's more of a number plate surround depth to it. And I might just put in a pixel there as well. And then we could go back to something like this. Just trying to get a sense that this lip overhangs. Class. And then I think we'll try and do something similar with this, so we'll make this a bit darker. And this should also have a shadow on it because the boot lid would cast some occlusion. And that will continue under these rear lights. And then this part, it's kind of raised. Let's go back to our blueprints. So this is another kind of vent deal and kind of cuts in and then sticks out again. So we'll highlight this edge if we can. And this is going to be rough for now. And then we'll put a shadow underneath it again. this one, let's use the darker shadow. I'll taper across like that. I don't know if this is right. I'm kind of making it up now, but it looks right. It adds a bit of visual detail to the back of the car. I just need to work out how I'm going to terminate it here. I think something like this would do the job. Maybe that just needs a bit of natural. It's maybe not working quite right. It's this bit here that looks odd. So let's just try making this the natural shade of the car. Maybe I should just terminate it earlier. Let's look at the side view. Definitely want to continue, but it looks a bit messy like this. So bear with, let's just try some stuff out. I think that's close enough for now. You know, I don't want to take up all of your time doing this. Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to stop obsessing about it now. Okay, so what's left to do? Let's have a look at... So we do have a boot lid that we need to run in. So let's make a start on it like this. And we'll actually just hide our spider again. Stop being so big. And I actually don't know if it's got this, but I'm going to paint it in because it just adds a bit of interest. So we will bring in like the pillar line along here as well. So you know the deal, we've got paint highlighted above it now. Let's just continue this back a bit further down the car. So like there. I'm not really sure what this curve does, so let's get rid of it for now. Something that I do want to do, let's do our highlights first, but then, so that we know that this is going to be the darker cut for this part. And that needs to continue. Across like that. So now we can paint our highlight, and we'll have this as the raised edge. I like to think that, say, a new panel that runs into an edge would have a raised section because everything's slightly beveled on a car. Nice. And there's just one more thing I want to do before I save again, and that is we're just going to paint in a heavier shadow here. So that the wing sits like that. And we're just going to save again. Cool. So let's switch to the details tab, and we will get our rear lights filled in. So I'm going to use a darker red, something like this. Let's just add it in for now. Just doing the usual colouring in process. I once made a colouring in book of motorsport illustrations that I was very pleased with, and maybe this will inspire me to go back to doing something like that. It's a little error there that I want to fix, and also I think we need to bring that bottom of the light in. So let's just go back to our value layer and fix that now. So this wants to be the darker, and then this wants to be, oh, it's already set there. So maybe we just need to, I think I'm worrying about something that isn't important here, but just like to see a little bit of that. I'm just going to tap this so that I can undo, because otherwise I'm going to be drawing the same line over and over again. Yeah, that's better. Okay, and then let's flip back into our back view, and we'll take our red and we'll just bring the shade down a bit more, and we'll sample that as well. And then we'll just draw in, why is that not drawing anything in? That is because I'm on the value layer. So we're just going to undo that, and we'll go back to our details. Yep, there we go. Okay, so we'll switch back to our blueprints view. And we'll draw that line across, and we'll need to clean these up. It's going to be something like this. And let's also rough in, I think we could probably use like one of these greys. Let's get a sense of where this line goes. But we're going to have to draw this by hand because it's in 3D. So all of this is up for debate. You know what? I don't think we've done too bad a job here. still just need to tweak this UV. So let's just clean up this edge and then we can... So going to UV editing. And we're just going to select these two edges. And it's this part here. So we're just going to do this by eye. So this line here just want pulling up a little bit. And now everything lines up better without ruining the shape of the car. So I'll go back into texture paint, and I think for the most part this is looking good. What I want to do, just go up erase, is I'll just put some slightly different shades of red in the mix as well. So maybe something like this for a reflector. And then what I also might do is, I actually don't know how this is going to look, but let's try it. We could do some dithering on these parts. So it's essentially just making a checkerboard pattern. Yeah, I like that. Gives a bit of texture. So I think we might do the same thing on this one. So we're not introducing too many colours to the mix, but and then let's just paint in. So let's go to our blueprints, but we've got an indicator lens in here. So that'll just be a case of it's maybe a little bit vibrant. And when I've got something more white, I tend to like to put in a bit of, just a bit of something to give the impression of some glass in there. So no real plan here, just try to put in like a little, yeah, I think that'll do. Okay, I think we're kind of there. Just seems there's any obvious parts that I've missed. Oh, let's do some last little details. So let's paint in some bonnet catches, some boot catches, and they are going to have to be, like, we've got so little space to work with that I think they're literally going to be 1 pixel wide, and then we will paint. I'm going to do some shading to give it a bit more interest, but maybe something like that. And then let's do a rear number plate. So for me, where I live and where these cars competed, the number plates on the back are yellow. Rally cars have to have number plates because they drive between the stages. So let's bring this in. And we'll just clean out the edges. But we want to continue that shadow, so we'll just paint it a slightly darker. Except that's too thick. Let's just put some number plate that screws in. We should paint some highlights on the rear wing as well. Actually, it looks quite flat compared to everything else, so we'll do that before we finish up. But let's also put our front number plate in. And from memory, these were on the bottom of the front spoiler, and I think completely illegal for UK roads, but I clearly turned a bit of a blind eye to them. One rule for Richard Burns, one rule for everyone else. Okay, nice. We are very nearly there. Let's do the highlights on the rear wing, and then we can look at how we're going to do a livery for So back to the value layer. And there's bound to be some bits to clean up on this, but and it's a separate object. We could have merged all of these objects, but I do find it's kind of easier and cleaner to keep them all separate. So we're going to highlight edge there. And you'll notice that it's automatically painted through to the... I painted something on the boot that I didn't want. So we must fix that. I don't know where that's come from. So let's play it safe. Let's isolate this. Then maybe we'll just do like a little shade line here. And definitely here where it cuts in. And then also I think I'd like one. Maybe we'll do one here. Might look a bit weird, but so paint this in. And let's paint in some occlusion here as well. So occlusion is where natural shadows formed by like a lack of light in that, being able to reach that space. Yeah, it's just got some more depth to it now. So what did we do here? We broke something. I think it's in the value layer. So we're just going to Control-Shift-Click. Yeah. So we're just going to go back to our principal shader, so we've seen everything. And let's just fix the damage that we've done here. So back to texture paint. Take our neutral color, paint this back out. And I think we'll go for the darker here. We might as well fix this while we can. We might as well make things worse while we can. Let's just check we've not managed to overpaint anywhere else by mistake, but I think we're good. Oh, we've got something here as well. I wonder what happened. But you can see, because of this workflow, everything's easily fixable. I think I am going to call this done. The only thing I could paint in, oh yeah, the only thing left to do actually is to paint in something to represent the wheel arches, and we're going to have to do this by hand, I think. Do I actually want to do this, or am I best leaving it? Maybe we could just... Okay, I'm going to do this, and we'll decide if it's a keeper or not. So we're going to use the line tool to start with. Yeah, definitely looks better, doesn't it? Even if it's a bit wonky at the moment. So something like that, and then we'll go back to space. And then I don't know how, I guess this would be part of the door handle. The door panel. So this should actually come down like this. And then let's just take this back to, let's clean this up. Yep, I think that works. So we just need to put in a highlight, I think, along this lip. No, that doesn't look good. Let's get rid of that. So let's highlight along here instead. And then a softer shadow in here. But only on this part. And then we'll carry on our highlight on here, but I might actually stop it there. Okay, let's just paint in this front one, and then we're going to call this body panel done. So we'll go back to line to start with. Something like this. It's a bit junky for sure. Let's start by seeing if we can tidy up our UVs a little bit. Sorry, I'm just undoing and working out how I want this to pan out. I think if I can just straighten that UV out a little bit. So let's just select all of these and work out where we're dealing with. I think it's really cool seeing the pixel art UVs in fast. So let's just pull this up a little bit and maybe straighten. We know there's some slight issues there already. Yeah, that's better. Go back to texture paint. Let's just make sure we've got the body selected. I think I just need to pull this whole thing up a little bit. So and genuinely, I would, if I were you following along, I would weigh up whether you want this, because this might be one of those things where you feel like it makes things look worse, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you, but I wanted to show you all the steps that I would take. And maybe this is something that I would change my mind about later, but it's kind of hard to show that in a video that I would work through these stages and then undo a lot of it. But we might change our mind when it comes to putting the livery on. So maybe we will revisit it. as we keep saying, nothing is permanent either. You get to make these decisions and change your mind. Make different versions. You know, that's the reason I always save incrementally rather than just overwriting my file, even though it's taking up gigabytes of hard disk space. Okay, that front arch is not the prettiest, but I think it works, and I don't want to do any more about it. So we're going to save, and then let's just see what it looks like now if we mess about with the base color. So we could refill this. We could also just put a color ramp in and drop it in that space. So now we've got a black imprezza. Let's try, there it is in white. So already from this workflow, you could bake out a bunch of different skins in different colors, or you could bake out a white one and then tint it in your game engine. So we've got something nice and flexible. I always thought they look cool in yellow. I think if we just mess about with this slider, we can bump it up a little bit. So you can do some like non-destructive editing inside Blender as well. All right, good work, guys. Okay, we're now going to do the livery. Okay, so let's get this finished up and bring in our livery. And the first thing I'm going to do, boom. That was not what I wanted to do. I've just disconnected that, so let's hook that back up again. So let's connect our color back to our mixer here so that we're bypassing the color ramp. We'll leave that in case we need it later on. So we have a livery layer that we've already made, and I just noticed that's set to linear and not closest, so I'll fix that as well. And you remember from an earlier video, if we choose like a kind of Impreza 555 iconic livery yellow, and then we paint on our car, you'll see that as I paint the yellow, it's interacting with the highlights and the creases and the cut lines, but it won't let me go over the detail layer, so we can very quickly work now without damaging anything that's underneath. And this is particularly useful if you are working on, say, multiple skins or you want to create different color variants. It just gives us a lot of flexibility without having to rework everything all the time if we make any changes. So let's just undo all of that mess. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go to the layout view and flip to the side. And I'm going to bring in this reference image of delivery, which I will link to in the description because it's not my image. So we're going to bring it in as a reference. And I'm going to scale this up. Get it roughly in place on the car. What I want to do is bump this to the front so I can see it, and then turn on our opacity. And we're just going to drop it down so we can see it overlaid over the car. So it's not going to line up perfectly because, well, it's pixel art to start with, and we made a lot of changes to simplify it and perspective, and there's loads of excuses, but we'll get it roughly in place, and we'll call it side reference. And then let's just flip to the perspective view. We're just going to push this back so it's out of the way, and then we're going to turn it off in perspective so that we have a clear view of the car. And then all we're going to do is the same process as before. We're going to knock back into texture paint mode, make sure we've got the body shell selected, and we're going to start painting. Let's just see if we can sample the color. Maybe we're going to have to just eyeball it a bit. So it's yellow, but it's got a little hint of green in it as well. Just need to change it into texture paint. So maybe we'll just bump it a little bit over this way. I think it's something like this. Maybe it's kind of occupying. I'll do for now. So usual process, we're just going to paint in. I think I do want to make that a little bit greener. Just a tiny bit. So we're going to paint in our curves. And make the brush a little bit bigger. We're just going to freehand it. We're going to work out where it's going to terminate at the bottom. And as usual, we're just kind of working fast and loose, and then we'll fix up as we go. But I do find it's better to just kind of get some marks down and then switch to the 3D view and get a sense of where everything's going to sit. I'm not sure why it's not visibly painting on there. We'll deal with that in a minute. Looks like there's something in the way, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but we can work around that. So let's just kind of guess where this is going. Oh, look at that, that's a very straight edge, freehand edge. Maybe something like that. Why won't it let me texture paint on there? It's because we've actually run out of space, so it's doing exactly what it's meant to do. I think that's okay. I think we can continue this line across, and then maybe we'll just kind of go something like this. Bracket pixel art. So this curve is looking a little bit off to me. So we're just going to paint in a curve that looks better. Sometimes you want to follow the reference exactly, and sometimes you want to make some choices about, does this look right to me? And let's fill in the rest of this. I mean, actually quite a lot of this is going to be covered by a number sticker, but we need to do a few little tweaks to make that work, so we'll just fill it in as a whole shape for now. This is the door lock that's causing a bit of confusion, but let's not worry about it. Just kind of looks like a slight scruffy edge on there. We could always go in and change the colour slightly. It's looking pretty cool. So let's continue this over and over. That's the first part of our livery done. And of course it's on both sides. So let's just maybe just bump my reference photo down a little bit, because I think it's sitting a little bit high. So let's go back into object mode. Yeah, it looks better. Fake it until you get exactly what you wanted, until a mistake that you made becomes part of it. And then let's just paint in this curve. Let's go quick and loose. It's not too bad. Not too bad either. We'll neaten those up. And we'll bring in this part. And then I'll see if I can just paint this as one curve. So another go. Yeah. I find it's easier if you do long unbroken curves wherever you can. Okay, and then we'll use our erase tool to just get rid of the bits we don't need in there. I think actually I wanted a bit of that corner sticking out like that. And then let's just see how we're looking in perspective mode. Pretty good, pretty good. Pretty, yeah. And it's very satisfying to see it doing all of the shading for you at this point. Feels like some kind of weird magic. Even though what it actually is hours and hours of painstaking work to get to that point. let's just neaten this up a bit. So I think we have it slightly staggered like that. There you go, there's your stripes. Let's have a look at how we're going to do the stars. And we do have some problems here, because we're really going to hit the pixel limits of what we've got. And I'll show you what I mean. So if we paint like this, it's automatically snapping into a position that is off the line. And that is probably about as much information as we've got to play with. So they can't be, like you see, if I paint there, nothing happens. And we need to make sure that they're even. So this is actually going to have to be either down here or higher up. Let's try putting it higher up. So you can see that they're not perfectly even, but I think they are slightly different sizes. It's an odd badge, the Subaru badge. I've never really questioned it. It's not as weird as the Alfa Romeo one, obviously. That's the weirdest badge. It's the man being eaten by a snake. And if you don't believe me, go and look it up. So let's try for this big star. And we've probably only got enough pixel density to do something like this. We just want to make sure it's even all around. And then let's do this one. So this one is looking wider than the others, I think. So let's just trim either side. 2 more to do. That one's way off, so let's just remove that. And there we go. Maybe for balance, we should just move all of this over one, which is going to be a bit annoying because we essentially have to paint everything in again, but let's just do it. Let's just get it done. So that feels more balanced to me, I think. Did we actually manage to move that over, or did I just... Yeah. It could maybe even go one further, or we could just move this whole thing over one. I think I'm just going to take this out and repaint it 1 pixel over. Because more than anything else, when you work in pixel art at this scale, yeah, there you go. Balance really matters. We could maybe thicken this up slightly just by increasing that out. Yeah, again, I think that really helps. Okay, I'm just going to save my progress. And if we go back to our... Why do I always go through 270 degrees rather than just this curve here? Not quite right. Let's just neaten that up a bit. And then also we've got these little details here, which we're never going to be able to paint all of it in, but we could give like an approximation of something. So we're literally just putting in a few pixels to kind of represent the shape. Something like that. And it's almost part of the effect. And I'm just going to freestyle something on the front, like a sort of Pirelli logo. And again, we don't have a huge amount of pixel information, so it's going to be something like, let's do this, and then one of these down, and then maybe like, so it doesn't say anything, but it looks like it might say something. But maybe we'll fill a bit more over like that. Yeah, that's much better. Your brain's already like, oh, that could be a Pirelli logo. So I think we're coming to the end here. I'm just going to paint in the number plate, not this number plate here. Number sticker, I don't know what the correct term is. So we could make another layer, but I think for the sake of this, we're just gonna go for it. So that should give me enough now to come into perspective view. That's not looking very white, is it? It's kind of an off-white. Why is that doing that? Something weird's happening here. It is because this is set to color instead of mix. So let's pick up our pure white again. And let's put in some kind of color bar at the top. And we'll also just run kind of box type design. Whoops, fix that. No, we'll just do it again. Let's just frame it off like this. Yeah, I think that works. Could maybe, does that feel cleaner? Yeah, I think that's nice. Okay, so there is one slight problem that we've got now, and that is if I paint the number 5 on here, and we'll do it better than this, but we've got a mirror image on the wrong side. So there's two solutions. One is pick a number that can mirror perfectly. So you could paint an 8 or a 0 or an 11. Maybe not an 11, you'd have to do the perfectly straight 11. So there's a few options there, and that's maybe what I would suggest, but I did want to get into kind of UV unwrapping, how we would avoid that mirroring problem, but I think that complicates this tutorial. So for now, we are just going to paint a number 8, and in some future lessons, I will show you what we can do when we bake out these textures to avoid that problem. But let's just cheat our way through this now. because this is a long video and I don't think introducing a new idea at this point is particularly helpful. So you'd think an 8 would be easy enough to do, wouldn't you? But you just try and give it some kind of form. So I'm just kind of guessing here what I want. Is it shorter on the bottom half? I think it is. Okay, and there we go. I think I'm going to call this video done. So we've got our neatly textured, hand-painted Impreza that we can change the colour of and make liveries that never existed that look kind of cool. I mean, what would it look like on a... Yeah, maybe they got it right to start with, but... Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. In the next lesson, we're going to tackle the wheels, because there's some whole different techniques for that. And there's a few methods I'd like to show you. And then we will cover baking out the textures to put into a game engine. And then you are done. And you can go away and make your own perfect pixel cars. And if you don't want to do that, keep an eye on my itch page, because as I say, I've got a pack of 5 coming soon that will save you all of this work. But, you know, it's an enjoyable process, and maybe you want to see how I've made mine and pick them apart and make them your own. So keep an eye out for that, and I will see you in the next video.